Last month's was on water preservation and storage. This week's is on hygiene and sanitation, or as I subtitled it, where do you go when you have to go and you got nowhere to go? A couple of the things that we're going to cover in this section are, could this be a reality? I've always used my toilet. It's never failed me. Why do we need to talk about this? After water, sanitation really is a top priority. It is one of those things that few people think about, but it really is a priority of things that we do need to consider. What kind of infections and diseases are caused by unsanitary conditions? And the other question is, when we talk about this with most people, they say, well, I'll just go in my backyard and dig a hole. Can I do that? There are some problems with doing that. So there are some options. We're going to discuss some kind of toilet options, latrine options. And can you dig a hole? And if you did, how would you do that? And I don't mean use a shovel. There are other options that way. And I want to talk about trash. One of the things about sanitation and doing this kind of stuff, if there should be an earthquake or a major disaster of some sort, one of the first things that stops happening is the regular trash pickup stops. Roads could be broken, those kind of things, and so trash pickup may become an issue. What do we do with the mounting mountains of trash? And I don't suggest like the gentleman who was up in Berkeley who stored all of his trash for a year. Did you hear about that?
Yeah.
No, yeah? Some guy decided that he was going to store all of his trash for a year, was not going to throw it away, and kept it in his one-bedroom apartment for an entire year. Yeah, doesn't that sound pleasant? No, that doesn't sound overly pleasant, but he learned a lot that way. And I actually went to his website and I learned a little as well. We're going to talk a little bit about personal hygiene, showering, washing your hands, and those kind of things. I know that kind of seems simple, but this is an emergency 101 class, so that's why we're kind of keeping it simple. Could this be a reality? What is the possibilities that you might not be able to use your bathroom in your house? Well, let's go back and talk about the system that we do have in our house. The ancient systems for removing human waste, as long as we've had humans, we've had human waste, and they would go out behind a rock or a tree, and as soon as they started moving into cities, it became a little more complicated. The early systems were no more than just troughs in the street, and you would have your little chamber pot, you would pour it out your window, and it would just float down the street, and then it would float down the street into your drinking water. That's why people were so sick in the Middle Ages. The Romans, though, had a very good idea, and they actually started making clay pipes. Some of those, and they would use fresh water that was constantly running to wash away the human refuse and flush it out into a reservoir system. Some of those clay pipes that the Romans used are still in use today. It was a simple system: fresh water in, gravity fed, water out the other end. Very nice, very simple. They still work with the same, those systems, some of those systems are still in work today. But they are reliant, and our system works the very same way. Fresh water in, most people don't think about it, but the water that goes into the back of your toilet tank is the same water that comes out of your drinking your faucet in your kitchen. It's fresh water. You could drink it if you wanted to. I don't recommend it. The toilet tank is not something you clean very often, but you could drink the water that comes out of it. So it is a freshwater system. Fresh water in, little flapper at the bottom, you open it up, it whisks it away, and we never see it again. Unless you happen to work in the sanitation department, and I've spoken to a few people who do, and that's where I got some of the information for what I'm going to share with you tonight. So you have a system of fresh water carrying in and a cohesive system that carries it away. What could disrupt that system so that we would necessitate having to do something other than using our bathroom? Well, think about it for a second. You have fresh water coming in. There are several things that could disrupt that freshwater system. An earthquake breaks the pipes, no fresh water coming in. Power failure. Most of the water that we receive here in Southern California is delivered to us via pumps. The water pressure is the water is pumped into your home, and that water pressure is maintained through electrical pumps. So if there is a long period of electricity, the unavailable of electricity, those water pumps may or may not work. They have redundant systems and backup systems to make those work, but it is a possibility. Broken pipes, a lack of power outage. Social unrest. One of the things that can happen in riots and those kind of things is people break off fire hydrants. The fire hydrant systems are in a secondary system connected to the freshwater system that we all drink. So if enough fire hydrants are broken and they have to shut off enough water systems, it's possible that there would not be any fresh water delivered to your house. No fresh water in, no bad water out. Also terrorism. Terrorism in some of the aspects from what I've read from the government, they can and have made plans on attacking our water supply, putting bacteria or putting things into our water supply. How many of you have driven to Las Vegas? You drive over what's called the California Aqueduct. You've seen it before. The water that comes to your home, some of it, not all of it, but in Southern California, travels in these large aqueducts. It's open to the air. And anybody else who wanted to throw a dead coyote or whatever else into it. I just say coyotes because it just came to me. And so those systems, now it's treated before it comes to us, but it's a possibility. And if our water system was tainted, the powers that be could or may have to shut that water supply off for a period of time to make sure that it is sanitary. And so there's lots of reasons why the water to your house could get shut off, and therefore you would not be able to have the fresh water that comes in to use your bathroom. That is not to mean that you couldn't use lots of other ideas. If you have a pool, you can take the pool water, put it in the back of your tank, flush your bathroom as it needs be. But you're going to have to do something outside of your normal day-to-day, push the button, flush the handle, it all goes away. The other things that can do it, when we talk about earthquake, if those pipes that lead from your house are damaged or broken, eventually that system will start to back up. We also live in an area that is fairly flat, so all that comes out of your house, some of which is gravity fed, most of which is pumped. And we pump our refuse in Orange County. We most of the system, some of the system is gravity fed, but it is pumped through cleaning stations. That cleaning station, once the water has been treated, is pumped offshore. Those are all electrical pumps. And so if that pumping system stops, you might have plenty of fresh water going in, but when you push the handle, nothing goes out. In fact, eventually it may start to back up, and that would be a very bad situation. And so I'm just trying to get you thinking that that little white throne that you sit on, and so thoughtlessly as we sit there and thumb through our magazines and trying to read the daily newspaper or whatever you may choose to do while you're in there. My father used to be in there for hours, and I could never figure out why. Now that I have 4 children, I realize why. It's the one place you can lock the door and they can't get you. And they really don't want to come in. How many of you have ever lived in an area